Okay, I want to talk to y'all for a minute about setting up your color, doing your color settings, and what that panel means and what in the world do you do with it. Because when I first started out playing around with Photoshop and Illustrator, I was completely lost on this, and I've kind of grasped it now, and I kind of want to do a video so you all can reap my knowledge from what I know. Before I start, I'd like to say that there's a woman by the name of Jennifer Smith that has written a book called Adobe Photoshop CS5 Digital Classroom, and she does a whole chapter on this. And the book is pretty inexpensive. And the book is a chapter of lessons. And I've done a book review on her. I really, really like her book. And a lot of this information, you can we're going to talk about color gamuts in a minute. A lot of this information you can read about in that book. You can buy that book on Amazon for like nothing now. It's I'll put a link below. Okay, let me just tell you what I'm doing. I'm going to edit color settings. This whole video did not come from her book. I've worked on it for a while. But if you're trying to learn this and you want a lesson, her book is a good book to use. Okay. This panel right here stumped me for the longest time. I didn't understand what all this was. I understood RGB and Cmyk, but this stuff just really stumped me for a long time, and I didn't understand it. But I've done some more reading on it, and I really think I've got a grasp of it. So I'm going to talk to y'all about it. In this, you have when you're picking your color settings, there's a couple of things you want to focus on, realize. You have color models and you have color space, and those things are important that you understand what they are. Color models are RGB, CMYK, and HASB, and your publishing medium determines which model is chosen. So if you're going to a professional print shop where they have a sheet-fed printer, or a press where it's coming in off of rolls of paper, they have inkwells that are a whole inkwell of cyan, a whole inkwell of magenta, a whole inkwell of yellow, and a whole inkwell of K. And what they do, they make plates. And each, they have a cyan plate, they have a magenta plate, and they have a yellow plate and a black plate. And each of those plates lays down the color on that sheet-fed printing, or whatever. If it's a roll, if you are sending it to a printing house, you want to use CMYK. You are dealing with that color module. If you are using your home printer, unless you're putting in 4-color ink in that home printer, you're generally using RGB. And I'll just clarify it like that. RGB is 3 colors. It's red, green, and blue. Your copier, your home printer lays down those 3 colors. If you opened up that little ink thing, that cartridge that goes in there, it has 3 colors. It's red, green, and blue, and those 3 colors are laid down on your paper to create the colors you need. Now, with that said, HSB is a color model too, but I don't know that much about it, and honestly I've never used it. So y'all can read on it, but I don't use that. Okay, so your basic 2 color models are RGB and CMYK. If you are sending it to a printing house, most likely you are using CMYK. If you're having it professionally printed on a big printer, I'm not talking about Instaprints, and Instaprints is using their copier. I'm talking about a printing house that is publishing like magazines and that sort of thing. Those printing houses use huge presses, and those presses have plates that are CMYK, and so your ink is CMYK, and they use 4 colors of ink to make the color you see in magazines and what other publications they print. Okay, RGB is your standard, and even if you're going to like Instaprints or whatever your down the street printer is. If they're printing it on a fancy printer in their office or business, then like your home printer, then standard usually it's RGB. Okay, now comes the issue of RGB. RGB is not just straight RGB. Within RGB there are different color spaces, and these are the color spaces. There's Apple red, green, and blue. There's Adobe red, green, and blue. There's Color Match RGB. There's a whole host of them. They each have their own gamut of color that you can see. And so if you use RGB, Adobe RGB Red 1998, you are not getting the same gamut color as you would if you use this, Apple RGB. They each have a gamut, a range of color that they can produce. For example, let me show you all this. Here's a gamut. This is the gamut of colors that are out there in the world. This is your whole gamut. But there's inside this gamut of color, there are other gamuts. So here's you have on the outer perimeter, that's your natural gamut of color, of all the colors, okay? But the RGB color gamut, RGB can only produce certain colors, and they can only produce colors that are within this gamut. CMYK can only produce certain colors, and they can only produce colors that are in this gamut. So when you're talking about gamuts or color modules, you're talking about the range of color that model or that color space can produce. Because remember, inside RGB you have different color spaces. You have you know, RGB 1998, and that might produce color spaces down here. And then let me show you this. Like this is an RGB color space, and so here what you're looking at is here's the RGB color gamut, and what this is doing is breaking it down and saying, okay, yes, you have an RGB color gamut, you might have an RGB color model, but within that color model there are gamuts of color that are set. So if you choose Pro Photo RGB, this is your color gamut. If you choose Adobe RGB as your color space, this is for RGB, this is your color gamut. If you choose sRGB, this is your color gamut, etc. So what that's relating to is this. So if you choose Adobe RGB 1998, sorry y'all, give me a minute, you are choosing the colors that are within this color gamut, okay? If you choose this, sRGB, you are choosing the colors that are in this RGB color gamut color space, sRGB right here. Okay, so that's how that works, and what that relates to when you are choosing these. This is what you are choosing. This, okay? I hope that explains it to y'all. It took me a long time to grasp that, and it seems so simple now, but I really did struggle with it. So it's not just the RGB. You've got color gamuts inside the RGB, and each of these color gamuts represent different shades of color and different things. So you need to consider those. Hope that helps. And when I was starting out, I'm just being honest, I didn't understand what gamut is. And for you, those of you that are in that boat, a gamut represents the number of colors that can be detected or produced on a specific device. So this is this has a different number of colors that can be produced than this does. Okay, so a gamut is a range of color. Even though you pick RGB, you can't get all the RGB ranges. Okay, so that's that. Now there's another thing about this menu item I want to talk to you about. Here it says unsynchronized. Your Creative Suite applications are not synchronized for consistent colors. To synchronize, select color settings and bridge. Okay, this you really want to do. When you get going on your Creative Suite, you're going to be using Photoshop and cutting things and slicing things and bringing them into Illustrator and vice versa. And you want the color you produce in one application to match the color you produce in the other application. So in order to do that, you want to go to Bridge and do your color settings there so that they are consistent across all your applications. And if you go here and you go to Edit and then you hit Creative Suite Color Settings, and this one I created on my own, it's a personal one, and so that's what I usually use. And then if you go, now this I've changed for the sake of us talking, so it's synchronized now. Okay, so if I open up Photoshop, it too will be synchronized, and they will all have these settings, and the settings is a synchronized color setting for your Creative Suite applications: Flash, Photoshop, InDesign, Illustrator, whatever you're using. But they will all have consistent color setting profiles. So if you open up Photoshop, you will see that it has this working space, or Adobe RGB, and this working space, this CMYK working space, and you will see that across all applications. If you open up my Flash, they will have the same thing. They all open up with this color setting. This color setting predefines these options here for you, so you don't have to do that. There's also a couple standard ones, but that's the one I use. Now let's look at the color picker. Going to the Tools menu, I'm clicking on the rectangular marquee right here, and I'm drawing out a square of color. It's blue because this is blue, and it has no border because this has no border. If you double click this icon in the tool menu on the left hand side, you get what is called the color picker. The color picker is very informative in helping you do your color management. This right here is your out of gamut for printing warning icon. This indicates that although you may have selected a very nice color, it's never going to print based upon the preset color settings you selected. To fix that, Illustrator makes that very easy. All you have to do is click on it, and it says, okay, down here is the original color, up here is the new color it's selecting, so that this color will be in gamut of your color printer. You hit OK if that's all you want to fix, and it will lay that color down. See how it did that? Now let's go back into it. You still have some other issues going on. Right here is another warning, and what this is saying is that it's not a web safe color. This color that I've chosen, now that it's in gamut with my printer, is still not going to be a color web safe color. To fix that, all you have to do is click on it. Illustrator, Photoshop, whatever you're using, fixes it for you, makes it very easy. This is the color you were at, this is the new color. If you're happy with it, hit OK. Now there's some other elements that we want to look at in the color picker. Let's start with, I've made this diagram over here. Let's open that up. I don't know. Hang on 1 minute. Let me see if I can get this opened. Okay, good. So I'm going to move this over here. There's some other elements. This is just an image, you all. This is the actual color picker. And this is just an image I made. There's some other elements in the color picker window that we want to talk about, and one is this area right here. This is called the color field, and as you click on it, your color comes up and it'll show you what the colors are. You'll also notice that these things change. The values in these boxes change. If you want to use colors that are safe only for the web devices, you can check this box, and it will give you only colors that are color web safe colors. So if you want this hue, these are green. In the green hue, these are color safe colors. In the orange hue, these are color safe colors, or web safe colors is what I'm trying to say, and vice versa. So that's how that works. So if you're doing web design, you really want to have this on if you're designing for a web application, because all these colors are web safe colors, and they will produce consistently across applications, which you really want. Okay, now let's talk about some of the other components in this window. Over here you have a button called Color Swatches. If you click on it, it will give you all your swatches that are in this panel as well. This little icon indicates that you are in red, green, blue module. You can pick colors from there. Again, you have your web safe and gamut safe warnings right here. Over here you've got the numbers that this color represents in CMYK mode or model. Here you've got the red, green, blue that this the numbers that this color that you're currently on represents in the RGB model. Up here you have the HSB model. If y'all will hang on for just a moment, I have another little picture for y'all to look at while I explain some things to you here. These are just diagrams I made real quick in Photoshop so that we could go over this stuff. HSB stands for hue, saturation, and brightness. If you look down here on the right hand corner of my screen, you'll see that this is the HSB model. This color that's selected these are the numbers that pertain to that in the HSB model. Hue is this. Okay, these are hues. Pink, red, green, orange, those are hues. Here it's represented in a degree, and that's because on the color wheel, if you look at a color wheel, it's a circle and it's 360 degrees. So that's telling you where on that color wheel that color is. All the way up to 360. See what I'm saying there? And if you read down there, it says that as well. I've got another picture for that. Hang on for 1 minute. Let me close this. Okay, here's a color wheel. As you can see, it's 360 degrees. That number is in degree format because it's telling you where on the color wheel, degree-wise, it lays. Or it falls, I guess is the correct term to say there. Okay, let me get my thing back open here. Okay, so that takes care of hue. Next component on here is saturation. And saturation is very simple, the purity, and it's represented by percentages. This is 100%. That's the most saturated you can be of that color. This is 0%. That's the least saturation you can be in the color. So it is the strength or purity of the color. Saturation represents the amount of gray in proportion to the hue, and like I said, it's measured in percent. 0% is gray, 100% is your full saturation. Okay, next component on here is B, and if you look down here in the right hand corner, B stands for brightness, but I will tell you I think of B as black. It's in my mind how much black is being laid down. So here again it's in percentages. The number is represented in percentages. The technical book term says that B stands for brightness, and it's lightness or darkness of a color. So that's 100% light, and that would be 0%, which is black. Light, no light. Okay, so that's how the HSB model works. That's all I've got for you all for now. The Adobe Photoshop CS5 Digital Classroom by Jennifer Smith is a good book if you want to learn more about this topic as far as color management, color information. She's got a whole chapter dedicated to it, lesson 6, and the book is, easily available on Amazon. You can buy it secondhand probably now because it's on a CS5 that I have this information from. And you can work through the lessons. The book's very, very helpful. I've done a book review on it, and I've told all that. So that's all I've got to say on this, and if you have any questions, please feel free to comment down below. If you'd like to be a subscriber, please subscribe by clicking on the subscribe box. Those subscriptions help my viewing, and it enables me to do these videos. So if you find these videos helpful, please do subscribe. Please do comment. Even negative comments I'm fine with, whatever you want to do, but please comment so I know I get feedback. Please give me feedback on it. Thanks.